The age before the Erd Tree was all but lost to the passage of time, but any tarnished who have faced off with a Crucible Knight have experienced a harsh lesson in history firsthand. This elite unit of knights will be the focus of this video as we explore their origin and determine their true purpose and role in the lands between. We will also answer the burning question of who the Crucible Knights truly serve. So, without further ado, let's get started. The Crucible Knights were a company of 16 incredibly powerful warriors who could be found in virtually every area of the lands between. Their presence incited terror in those who have faced them, and their unique powers and abilities further enshrouded them in mystery. However, after summarily defeating each member of this elite unit, we begin to unravel the hidden truths beneath the armor. The item description for the Crucible Axe Helm reveals several interesting details. Helm of the Crucible Knights, who served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. The axe ornamentation is the Knight Ordovus' mark, displayed also by his men. Holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erd Tree. Strengthens aspects of the Crucible incantations. The flavor text for the Crucible Greaves adds that, in time, the strength shown by these knights, and even their appearance, was seen as chaotic and deserving of scorn. Despite the fact that the Crucible Knights served Godfrey, who was mistakenly referred to as the first Elden Lord, several details simply don't add up. But more on this later. Ordovus was one of the foremost Crucible Knights. Interestingly enough, his name was actually derived from the Ordovician period, which was the second of 6 geologic periods of the Paleozoic era over 400 million years ago. A fitting name considering the recurring references to the Primordial Age. Sadly, despite their magnificent display of powers and abilities, these very qualities were regarded with disgust and contempt. But why were these knights perceived as chaotic and deserving of scorn? The aspects of the Crucible incantations state that their unique abilities were manifestations of the Erd Tree's primal vital energies, an aspect of the Primordial Crucible, where all life was once blended together. It seems that the Crucible Knights were not well received during the age of the Erd Tree simply because they were from a different time, when the line between man and mer were altogether non-existent. The term primordial refers to something that exists from the beginning of time, and the word crucible refers to a severe trial or set of circumstances in which different elements interact, resulting in the creation of something new. If we put the two words together, we find a shocking revelation. The Primordial Crucible was quite literally the first age of the lands between, when all life existed as one primeval, perfect form. If we consider each of the Crucible incantations including the breath, horns, and tail, the undeniable image of a dragon is conjured in the forefront of our minds. It would seem that Queen Marika has some explaining to do, especially considering the fact that Dragon Lord Placidusax seemed to reign as Elden Lord long before the puppet Godfrey earned his title. The Crucible Knights originally served their true lord, Dragon Lord Placidusax. However, after the fateful events of the war against the dragons, crumbling Farum Azula and all of its inhabitants were simply written out of the annals of history and forgotten to time. Queen Marika, the ever-resourceful conqueror, repurposed the Crucible Knights so that they may serve their new lord Godfrey, and from that point forward, their fates were forever changed. After Godfrey had exhausted his usefulness, he was exiled from the lands between and became the first Tarnished. However, his newly acquired knights refused to follow in his footsteps and remained behind, further supporting the notion that their loyalties were only surface level. Each of the Crucible Knights went along their own path. Some continued to serve, while others were imprisoned or left to guard special locations. Regardless of where they stood watch, they were despised all the same by the more civilized humans who now called the lands between their home. The Crucible Talismans reveal interesting details about what lies beneath their primordial gold armor. A talisman fashioned from a scale that embodies the aspects of various creatures, said to have grown on the human body long ago, a vestige of the crucible of primordial life. Born partially of devolution, it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. These scale, feather, and knot talismans all seem to point towards a more primal form reminiscent of a flying horned beast. These beasts that the Crucible Knights emulated were likely the ancient immortal dragons. Despite their lack of a fan club during the age of the Erdtree, their red-tinged armaments referred to an ancient holiness that dwelled within them. The flavor text for Ordovus' greatsword states, "Greatsword of Ordovus, one of the two honored as foremost among the Crucible Knights. This sword is imbued with an ancient holy essence. Its red tint exemplifies the nature of primordial gold, said to be close in nature to life itself." The other knight of great renown was Siluria, who donned the Crucible tree set. Like her predecessor, her name also had ties to a real-life geologic era that immediately followed the Ordovician period, the Silurian period. Most interesting of all is that these two eras were best known for the mass extinction event that defined them. Ironically, the 16 Crucible Knights that served Godfrey were all that remained from the primordial age of the Crucible. These living relics were remnants from the past that were unfortunate enough to survive Queen Marika's brutal conquest in the name of the Erdtree, left to endlessly wander the lands between in woe, silently awaiting the day they would meet their demise. Perhaps the most honorable thing to do was to finally put them to rest, so that they may return to that simpler time when life was blended together in peace and harmony. And that's all for this video. Until next time, it's the Inhuman One, signing out.